Our final moderator, Mr. Glenn Richardson from Jobs, Ohio. Glenn Richardson works with advanced manufacturing companies in an array of sectors to help them stay competitive in the Industry 4.0 world. Glenn has experience in operations and engineering, having worked in aerospace, automotive, and energy industries. Prior to Jobs, Ohio, he worked for Rolls-Royce Energy Systems, Inc. as the Vice President of the Packaging and Driven Equipment Supply Chain Unit. Glenn has also held positions with Dana Corp and at Honeywell, where he led the technical development of the fuel valves for the jet engine on the F-22 fighter. Glenn earned an executive MBA and a master's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Notre Dame and a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Purdue University. So at this time, I will turn it over to Glenn Richardson to lead our final panel.
Thank you very much, George. I appreciate that. Very, very kind words. So here we are, panel number 5. We're on the last stretch. So let's see if we still have it. OH. All right, very good. Well, as George said, I work for Jobs Ohio. I just want to let you know that Jobs Ohio is the private nonprofit organization that's responsible for economic development in the state of Ohio. I have responsibility, as you mentioned, for aerospace and advanced manufacturing. And one of our key strategies for the aerospace sector is urban air mobility. We are part of the state's advisory group focused on helping drive the advancement and deployment of this technology across the state. I would like to thank George Jetson Valcarcel, for the exceptional summit today. I've been here all day. I've been just enthralled with what's been going on this stage, and I know that we will keep you awake for the last hour here with this panel. But I did want to just recognize the great presentations, the great panels, the great networking and informative conversations, and I hope that we take a lot of actions out of this and a lot of relationships develop that help move this forward. Thank you, George, again, for this great work here, please. So our panel theme is Ohio's role to play in advancing and integrating urban air mobility into our communities. And that's a key word here, communities. I have a distinguished set of panelists to explore this topic, but I just wanted to touch on just a couple of facts. George mentioned why Ohio is important to UAM. I just want you to share with you the fact that, Ohio is the 7th largest state in the nation. We have over 11 million people in this state. In addition to that, we have major mid-market cities. You think about, there are very few states in the nation that have a Cleveland, a Columbus, a Cincinnati, all tied in with the 71 corridor, but also Dayton and Toledo. So we have 5 major cities. So if there's ever a place to experiment and work out and pilot the initiatives for UAM, it's right here. In addition to us, creating the aerospace industry back in 1903 with the Wright Brothers and helping put North Carolina on the map by letting them fly there. I won't go there. I think there is one other important element to this, and that is that the governor of the state of Ohio, back in April, was at the Springfield Airport, where we announced SkyVision, which is the collaboration between the state of Ohio and the Air Force Research Lab to put in place a system that supports beyond visual line of sight flight. And the governor said there, he basically said, listen, Ohio started this industry. We're relevant today because we're the #1 supplier to Airbus and Boeing for aerospace components and systems. He says, and we're going to lead the way in unmanned aerial systems. That was his words. So we're all here fundamentally following his leadership to work to bring this industry forward. So I thank you all for being here, for participating, for helping to advance the conversation required to move this forward. And I'd now like to introduce our great panel here. Going to start off with Mark Zanoni he's a principal at Zanoni and Company. Mark is a notable thought leader on urban transportation. He brings 25 years of global transportation experience with perspectives gained from both public and advisory sectors and from projects and clients around the globe. He covers a broad range of emerging technologies and innovation that include passenger drones, flying cars, smart airports, autonomous and connected vehicles, and smart transit, and how these are transforming transportation through increased efficiency, profitability, improved service quality, insightful operating data, and enhanced passenger experience. All this with a backdrop of the new challenges such as privacy, safety, and social and market impacts. Mark holds a BA in history from Boston University and a master's in urban planning from Columbia University, and is also a certified urban planner. Mark, thank you for being with us. I'd like to give you just a few moments to just say why you're interested in aviation, innovation, and what fires your jets about UAM.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, I'm an urban transportation consultant, and I'm focusing on urban mobility and technology. And on this panel, one thing I'm would like to share is the interest of cities in this. I know this is urban air mobility, but how many if you can ask from the audience, how many of you are from a city other than an airport are representing a city government here today? That's what I was thinking. Not many. There's not a lot of city input. So, and there's been a lot of parallels between like Uber and Lyft and the autonomous vehicles on the ground. If you look at Uber and Lyft, they impacted transit, right? There's been a lot of correlation between the loss of revenue and money for public transit systems, right? But if the city of Cleveland, for example, wanted to charge a tax, let's say a $1 tax on any ride originating or ending in downtown Cleveland where there is good transit access, the city of Cleveland could not impose that tax because the state of Ohio regulates them. And Uber and Lyft have actively done that, is they've gone to states to regulate the ride-hailing companies. The previous speaker from Uber said they're all about collaboration. And I hope that that's true, that they're not trying to undermine cities, because I realize, and the person, Rex, also spoke about the many, many different municipalities and states. Yes, there has to be uniform standards and designs, but I don't want cities to lose the ability to regulate when they're able to. For example, there's a lot of ground control access. We won't be using heliports mostly for this. It's urban, so it's point-to-point within cities, so there'll be, in theory, either many, many vertiports all over the place, because it has to be convenient urban travel, if not at the end of your driveway. So those are the things that the city can control. So therefore, cities have to be at the table. And I applaud Ohio for being very visionary in having this conference, and George, and being a great leader in aviation. But cities cannot be left out of the dialogue, and cities have to be involved early. Because there are real estate companies and there are individuals already looking at properties in cities, at rooftops, in office buildings, in downtowns. And so, just like with scooters, and ride-hailing, cities can't come scramble later to come up with regulation on how to deal with this. Now there's billions of dollars people are spending, and if, like in zoning, you're grandfathered in for a type of use. So if people are spending billions of dollars on planned vertiports and buying real estate, the city can't come scrambling in later to say, oh, here's a regulation, you can't do that. So cities have to act now because industry is acting now. And so I'm asking cities and the states and everyone to work together truly, but cities have to be at the table.
Thank you, Mark. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Jennifer Clark. Dr. Clark is professor and head of the City and Regional Planning section at the Knowlton School of Architecture in the College of Engineering here at The Ohio State University. She specializes in urban and regional economic development planning. Dr. Clark is the author of several books, her most recent being Uneven Innovation, The Work of Smart Cities. That'll be forthcoming on Columbia University Press, so we look forward to it.
Came out on Tuesday.
Came out on Tuesday, so you can get out on Amazon and get that ordered. All right. Dr. Clark earned her PhD from Cornell University, a master's degree from Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota, and a BA from Wesleyan University in Connecticut. She currently teaches courses on urban and regional economic development theory, analysis and practice, and research design and methods. She has provided expert testimony before the U.S. Congress and policy advice and consulting to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the Canadian, UK, and U.S. governments, as well as serving on non-governmental policy commission and committees. Before joining the Knowlton School, Dr. Clark taught at Cornell University and the Georgia Institute of Technology, where she was also the director of the Center for Urban Innovation. Thank you for being with us. And if you wouldn't mind, just give us a little bit of your passion for this topic.
Sure, thank you very much. One of my favorite things about being on panels like this is I love to hear everyone's bio. It's always so much fun. Mine makes me a little bit embarrassed sometimes, but I love to hear everybody else's. Just to say that my background is really working on emerging and enabling industries. That's where I started out my research. And I got very interested in the idea of how emerging and enabling industries really diffuse into the broader economy. That's where my work really started. And the regional economic development implications of that. So when we were talking about what the economic development implications of an industry like this really are, I got very excited about that. I got very excited about the idea of both the diffusion into the private sector and to the public sector. And that's what I think is really interesting about this particular sector and the industry that's emerging here, is that it's not going to be a simple story. We're not just looking at what's happening in the private sector. We're looking at that hybrid space where the public and the private sector sort of meet inevitably. And cities have always been that space, right? So that's my urban planning background here. So in recent years, I got really interested through the smart cities conversation, because that seemed like such a clear place where diffusion into the public sector was happening of these technologies. And then, of course, urban air mobility is just right at that sweet spot, that multimodal mobility question. So I just want to underscore, while I still have the microphone for a second, that the subtitle of the most recent book is The Work of Smart Cities, and that's partly exactly what we've been talking about already here, about what cities need to know and be able to do in order to be partners in this process. So one of the things that I'm very concerned, and I know you're concerned about this too, is the work behind all that and how we think about how we train people to understand how this process happens and how to facilitate the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. I'd now like to introduce to you State Representative Adam Holmes. Representative Holmes is serving his first term in the Ohio House of Representatives. He represents the 97th Ohio House District, which includes Guernsey County and portions of Muskegon County. Representative Holmes is currently the CEO of Pure Industry Enterprises, a mechanical and industrial contracting company that has operated in Zanesville. He hasn't, for over 80 years. Prior to his work with Free Enterprises, Holmes spent 27 years in the United States Marine Corps and retired as colonel in 2016. During his career as a marine aviator, Holmes served in several senior leadership and command positions, including 40 combat missions supporting Operation Iraqi Freedom, and 3,000 flight hours supporting crisis response missions around the world. Thank you for your military service and for your continuing public service. Representative Holmes is very active in his community. His volunteer experience includes service at the Muskegon County Business Incubator, president, member of the Muskegon County Chamber of Commerce Safety Council, and subcommittee leadership as the chairman of the Ohio Aviation and Aerospace Technology Committee. Representative Holmes has a bachelor's degree of science in political science from the United States Naval Academy and a master's of science in global leadership from the University of San Diego. Thank you for being with us. Last but not least, Mr. Bob Tanner, Executive Director, Ohio Federal Research. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, you would want to say a few words.
Okay.
I thought I covered it all, but no.
Yeah, thank you. It's what an honor to be here, and what a thanks for hanging in. The true believers are here, right? So I respect that very much, in it to win it to the end. Glenn talked about what gives you the energy, and I do have this feeling of butterflies right now, like pre-Super Bowl. And I think for where we are as an industry, this must have been what it was like when the railroad started moving west, when Cornelius Vanderbilt and the rest of the guys started moving that way, when mass production of cars, when Henry Ford first got that going, and the city said, all right, how do we manage all these cars? I've seen the demand, and I've seen the future of where this technology is, where it is now and where it's going to go. During my aviation career with the Marine Corps, part of it included 9/11 and that transformation and that focus on aviation and aerospace due to that. And my job was to procure, and I did a lot of operational and developmental tests for the Marine Corps. So I saw firsthand what technology the United States can bring to bear, and I saw how people can apply it. And what we were able to do with that kind of focus and unified effort on something. That included UAM, and my last tour in the Marine Corps was in San Diego. I was the chief of staff of the Air Wing there that deployed all the air aviation forces to Iraq and Afghanistan. We organized, trained them, and deployed them there. And when I left, we had our first Joint Strike Fighter Squadron, and we also had our first weaponized unmanned aerial vehicles. And we were working on coordinated movement of those, how you would communicate and distribute them and organize them in packs. And I saw where that was and where that's growing. Feeling that energy, knowing what's really happening, what's going to go down, and coming to here now. Why it's so exciting is just what you heard all day today is Ohio is so blessed. We've got everything. We've got the manufacturing base. We've got incredible academic and technology capability here that's existed forever, and a political will and a history with aviation. My role now is to be that connector and that communicator inside government, because I think that's why I got the anxiety. We don't even have to develop new technologies. They exist. It's about application. So the victory is that we're all in this room together, and the other victory is that you've got a champion inside the State House, a governor that saw fit to have a director of aviation with Joe Zeese, an assembly that saw fit to have a specific aerospace and aviation technology committee that's got the best of all government, industry, and academics on that panel that I chair, and the willingness to go great and to go big and to go right now. And that's why I'm fired up.
Thank you, Representative. And now, not last but not least, Mr. Bob Tanner, Executive Director of the Ohio Federal Research Network. Bob has over 30 years' experience in transportation law and policy at the federal, state, and local levels. He recently joined the OFRN, the Ohio Federal Research Network, as its Executive Director, where he is responsible for day-to-day operations and leading the organization's strategy of entrepreneurship and collaboration across Ohio. Through partnerships among universities, government, and industry, OFRN provides guidance in the development of commercialization pathways for applied research in both the defense and commercial sectors. Prior to OFRN, Bob served as the Vice President of Corporate and Governmental Affairs and Associate General Counsel for NetJets, Inc. And prior to that, he had a similar position at the John Glenn International Airport. Bob is a graduate of The Ohio State University and Capital University Law School. Bob, thank you for being with us. So this panel, I'm really excited because we, I think, represent here. Are you going to talk? I'm okay. I'm so excited about asking these questions that I can. Please.
Well, am I on? Yeah. So really, you've asked what is the passion. The passion for me is just building public-private partnerships. I've done that for 30 years. I did it while I was at the Airport Authority, helped build out the Rickenbacker facility. I've done that with NetJets. I recall when Secretary Chow was just coming on board, and we met with her, and I said specifically, keep your eye on Ohio. We're going to do great things from an aviation standpoint. So I've traded the jet card in on a drone, and my wife's still not certain if that was a good move. I've told her PAVs are coming, so just hold on. But very excited to be here. The OFRN mission we can talk about as this rolls out, but it is one of building collaborations and partnerships. And this is an event that really highlights the capability that we have with those partnerships right here. We'll just have to leave this event and make it happen. So thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Bob. And Bob, you've been in this industry a long time, and you've been pushing initiatives, I know, with the advanced communications requirements for aircraft. I know the NetJets was all about that, and you were trying to push Ohio to move forward. So you're familiar with this space and the challenges. What I'd like you to respond to is, when you think about it, how can Ohio leverage its academic and federal research centers in collaboration with Odot to advance air mobility R&D testing and deployment in the state? And I think that that's a really important question for you, given your new position with the OFRN and how we're bringing together that public-private partnership there with your leadership now.
Sure. Well, that is indeed the mission of OFRN. It's to build those partnerships. If you start with the precept that R&D creates innovation, innovation drives economies, how do you create those economies in an accelerated fashion? How can you find the ROI through all of that R&D? And what I have been able to glean is that really is the X factor that's created when you put these partnerships together and you bring in Ohio's research and development industry, all of the research universities in Ohio. There's too many to name, and I don't want to leave anyone out, but the university's capability, the government installations with NASA Glenn, FRL, you couple that with industry and small business, it is an innovation pot, if you will, and it's boiling. We need to make sure that we have all of those ingredients and get ready for what will come out of that. What we've been able to fund through OFRN is really exciting projects. We spur that innovation through putting out technical challenges. And so we have funded 4 rounds of technology research. They are focused on UAV and all the facets, propulsion, energy, human factors, onboard computing. And what we've been able to see, those technologies are just leading edge. They are really, it's mind-blowing what exists in Ohio. Ohio has the opportunity to take all of that and start solving these national problems. So I think we do need to be appealing to the FAA and saying we have solutions. We're working on a lot of those right now. The R Tower is one that I'm particularly passionate about, but it's building out infrastructure for UAV operation. But it's getting the FAA and ODOT to understand the technology is there, the capability is there, we have the data analytics, we can prove this out. Now, let's solve the law and policy issues, as been mentioned throughout the day. That's got to catch up. So I think Ohio's really got the edge when it comes to collaborations and partnerships. Now we've really got to crack that policy and law nut so that we can deploy these solutions and bring them into mainstream operation. So lots of opportunity, and really it's because of the expertise that sits in this room.
Oh, that's awesome, Bob. Can you just mention a little bit of the statistics on funding, where you get your funding and how you've leveraged that up?
Sure. To date, through 3 rounds, we received about $32 million. Out of that, we have generated some $170 million in return investment back into Ohio. Probably 12 spin-out companies, 8 patents. It's building. We are seeing it real time that when you can put all of these resources together in a collaborative fashion, out of that comes success technologies and commercialization opportunities. And so the experiment is working, and I think the job growth you're going to start to see jump exponentially as these technologies mature, as they get to market.
No, that's fantastic. And just to be clear, that 31 million or 32 million was state money that you've now leveraged through federal grants and have been able to accomplish these amazing public-private results.
Right, that's federal investment, the follow-on investment. That's also private industry investing. I mean, some of this technology is just, anybody that watches the stock market ought to be jumping in on some of these things. I don't know if folks watched that national news event on persistent surveillance, the company that was highlighted on that program, that technology that they used, and it was an incredible video, but they had video of an assassination in Mexico that was, taken from an aircraft thousands of feet up in the dark. But that technology that captured that entire unfortunate event was technology that was spurred through the investment of OFRN and our Ohio partners, as one example.
Awesome. Yeah, that was persistent surveillance technology. It's worth a view on YouTube. Representative Holmes, this is to tag off of what Bob's talked about here with OFRN. So we're working the technology piece. We're working with our national assets in the state and trying to bring in the FAA into this. But it really starts with some money from the state. So what's your perspective from the legislature side on this, and how do you think that translates in terms of public opinion?
Okay, thank you. That's a good question, and it's certainly, and we heard this in the previous panels, that it's not ever going to be just a private endeavor or public. We've moved past that as a society, and it's going to require both. And it makes me, I'm very thoughtful about America and our legislative oversight. Our rule of law, which can be a challenge in everything that we've talked about, is also our greatest strength, because it brings that kind of organization and safety and standardization that's demanded in this uniquely industry, that we're going to need that. A quote that we always got at the Naval Academy from John Paul Jones: those who do not risk cannot win. And so there's going to have to be some skin in the game for a state, for those states that are willing to take those kinds of risks. Certainly, it's going to be about authorizations and safety things that we're going to have to, some sort of test things when you're in civic areas with this emerging technology. We're going to have to be comfortable with assuming some risk. But second is with investment money and sort of, I wouldn't say speculative, not anymore, not with this industry. It's venture capital on understanding the return on investment that is there if we're the first to the chalkboard. And that was said again in the previous panel. The FAA or any kind of standardized air traffic management for drones, if we can perfect it and demonstrate a winning formula, will be copied by everybody, but we'll own the information rights. And that's certainly, again, when I think about railroads engaged, who owned that? It's who got there first and laid it out first, and everybody followed that. So that can be us. So making that as a business case, and I like what you said there too, it's about return on investment and finding the right way to communicate that to decision makers in government, in state government, and in local governments, it's worth their interest to put in money now and assume a little risk now for long-term gains for their communities that they represent.
Thank you, Representative Holmes. In addition to that, we have some other challenges that I think you'd be best to address. When we think about, workforce, how does Ohio transition its legacy aerospace and aviation workforce to support this new industry of UAM? Not only from a manufacturing and systems deployment, but also from service provider networks and whatnot. And how can state legislation help Ohio become the Detroit of UAM?
Right, thank you. And I thought about that too. History repeats itself, and geography and terrain matter. That Ohio State has always, the state of Ohio, maybe Ohio State, has always been a logistics and transportation center for the United States since 1803. when the Great Lakes and the canal systems till now. Did you know that Ohio has the second most miles of interstate highway in the United States? Does that even seem, but it is if you count 70, 71 and move around. It's because of our geographic location. You've probably heard that we're within 8 hours by car of 50% of the U.S. population. And I've also recognized, talking with the Hyperloop people, that we're integral in that Pittsburgh, Columbus, Chicago triangle that they see as emerging as a logical place to put Hyperloop. It's because of our geographic and central location. And because of that location, there is the manufacturing that came here certainly from the Wright Brothers, but all the way until now, through World War II, and that development of aviation and aerospace. And because of that, that's why you have Wright-Patterson Air Force Base with the center of the United States Air Force's Institute of Technology, and all their research and development is hubbed there. It's why you have an elite world-class NASA representation up in Cleveland in the Sandusky area, and why you have an extraordinarily robust aerospace and aviation college network. And that's the Ohio State, certainly, and many others that I could call it if you're from there. Those all come together. So that we have that manufacturing base, it's along with all those that blessing of capabilities. But then to answer your question, government has to recognize that. Government can do three things for you, and I'm learning this now, for the experts, the subject matter experts. We can certainly legislate, create law that helps free you up. We can fund, we can buy, and that's certainly important, and advocate. And those three things together, and once I finally locked out in my mind of where I'm best applying my capabilities to support you, that it frees it up. And again, recognizing what our core competencies are. We are in a world competition. You guys know that, everybody that's here, and certainly state on state. We want to beat Alabama more than in football. And we know what Rocket Town is, and they know too. And it was interesting to see Uber here, what Silicon Valley is, what that brand is of high-end technology. We're competing there too, and the geography does matter. State boundaries still do matter because the laws are controlled there, and more local civic government. It matters. It still matters in this country. So recognizing that and applying that to further legislation. I hope that answers.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. We're going to switch gears a little bit here. A question for you, Dr. Clark. How should Ohio manage the regional economic development generated from integrating multimodal transportation plus logistics operations? When we think of this, UAM, autonomous ground vehicles, broader smart city, and how do we ensure equity in the system as we go forward?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I was so excited to come to Columbus and to Ohio State was that Columbus won the US DOT Smart Cities Challenge in 2016. I don't know if you all know this, but 76 other cities didn't. And having been involved in one of the ones that didn't, I decided I wanted to be on the winning team going forward. And so the energy coming from here, I hope you guys can feel it because it's overwhelming. The positive energy is amazing, and it confirms what I thought about the private-public partnerships that really push something like this forward. Seems to be just so well organized and managed here, above the rest, above the competition in other states, for sure. So, I mean, one of the things that I think is so exciting about this is that we're we're coming back to the question of whether or not how we reconnect innovation and production in the same place. And so we're talking about how important the R&D stakeholders are, right, both private and public sector, but how important the innovation component is, how important the production, and that the consumption for this, we're talking about the market right now. We've talked a little bit about that there is a military, a DoD component to this, in addition to the fact that there's a civilian component both within the private sector but also in the public sector as well. So for the public sector side of this, from the city side or the county side of it, really most of this will come first through use cases that have applications to health and safety, which makes a lot of sense. That's where we'd first see these deployments happen. But while we're doing that, while we're building that supply chain, one of the things that happens is you're building an industry that's a precision manufacturing industry, that instead of being a handoff where the design leaves, it's actually an iterative feedback between the manufacturing and the production. And it's not just production of the goods, the vehicles, it is the software, it's the hardware, it's the entire, these are really service embedded goods, which are the highest end goods we've got in the economy right now. So the idea of capturing this industry here is an incredibly important idea to take forward, I think, in terms of an economic development or regional economic development investment, because this won't be the only industry like this. Right? This is really one of many ways we're going to see production and that innovation in production come back and be connected in the U.S. If you think about sort of the challenges we're looking at today, like literally today, about how supply chains are getting disrupted, this again becomes one of those things we think about as critical infrastructure systems.
Thank you, Doctor. This will play off of that question a little bit, Mark. From a societal perspective, just kind of a rhetorical question, do we want urban air mobility for packages or for people? I mean, it's we're pursuing this as if it's a given, and maybe that's because technology sometimes leads the way. But if we do, what are some of the key issues that need to be addressed by policy or regulation to ensure public safety and acceptance?
Okay. From a society perspective, I'll answer for society. I do think that from a package delivery, people want that, right? People love the convenience of Amazon, even though it kills their own neighborhood. It kills neighborhood stores because they don't want to go to the store locally. They'll buy it off the internet, and they pick on Amazon, but it's the biggest, but it's internet shopping that's hurting communities because it's killing local stores, right? So people like that, they want it the next day, and of course they'll want it in a few hours. So for package delivery, absolutely. And there's, as earlier presenters spoke about, organ and tissue movement, there's those types of emergency urgent matters, but for package delivery, for just shopping, people still want that, even though it's probably not life-threatening. And likewise, on the movement of people do want that. They want to get from places more easily. And this addresses the second part of your question in that, they want to fight the traffic. That's why, Los Angeles is very interested in this because they have a huge traffic problem. But every city does, right? And even in New York City, you already have the helicopter service from Lower Manhattan to JFK, and you land on the air side, right? So you avoid the TSA line as well, or you do that at the heliport. But people want the convenience of it, and so therefore cities, again, it's a city thing, needs to look at some of these questions, right? So people want the convenience. If you have to drive your car to some vertiport station and then fly somewhere else and then take an Uber or Lyft or some taxi from that location to your final destination, it becomes a 3-part trip, and people don't like that. They want to go point to point. If you have to do so many points, you might just as well drive your own car. And the whole point is to avoid legs of a trip. Just like you don't want to connect on a flight if you don't have to. So that means we would need these vertiports everywhere, almost, right? To be truly convenient. And if you could have on demand, because if you have to go to a station, it's like a commuter rail station, it's not necessarily close to you unless you live right next to it. So maybe we don't need vertiports. Maybe it can come, as I said earlier, at the end of your driveway or your streets. So cities have to regulate that. Some people say that wait for the feds to come out with their regulations because that would preempt any state and any local. I'm saying do not wait for that. Regulate it now, look at the solutions now, and then tweak it as necessary once federal regulations come out, federal and state regulations. So locations, hours of operations, right? Aviation is federally regulated, but still cities can control, or local airport authorities control curfews. So it's still a local issue. If you do have these vertiports, you're going to have a lot of drop-offs and pickups from, again, drop-off from regular cars, Uber, Lyfts, taxis, bicycle parking, and other operations that'll happen at that location. Retail, maybe now we're in a residential neighborhood, but now you have retail because it supports these stations. So how do you regulate all that? Those things you have to consider. The location, hours of operations, and then the common use question came up before. Like, I know Uber, Elevate was looking at having their own stations, but if you look at airports, we don't have an airport for Delta, a different airport for United, different for Southwest, Alaska. It's one facility, and we don't want many as a society, I don't think we're going to want many vertiports, one for each different company. So the common use seems to be the way to go to be more efficient, have a more efficient use of operations. And then if you're going to have these in communities, because people want them close to you, you're not going to have so many that you have one centralized location. It's a more efficient use, and it's also less of that kind of activity in these neighborhoods, in these communities. So if it's on top of a building or it's in a residential neighborhood, it's shared amongst it. Of course, if it's exclusively Uber, for example, then Uber would be paying for it. So if now it's a common use, who's going to pay for it? So that raises those questions as well.
I'm sorry, and I wanted to add something because this was profound for me, where it really showed me where we're at as a culture. So sorry that the Kobe Bryant mishap. I'm so sorry that happened, and we all are. But think of that statement, that insatiable demand for that, and how much, and certainly he could afford that, but the demand for that kind of flexibility needs, especially in the LA area, it already exists, it's already occurring. So if there was a way to make that more flexible, more accessible, and safer, would we press on that? And of course we are, and I do think that the UAM is the answer to all three of those issues. And again, I get those butterflies because it's not going to stop. It's just going to, if anything, that accelerates what we're talking about today, the demand for it.
Very good. And I know that today we've heard a lot about, some of the issues that associated with society. One being privacy, two, safety, and then three, this idea of data and data security. So there are real challenges on the public side that will have to be dealt with, certainly as we continue to push on the technology and even working at the FAA level. Mark, I think your perspective is, hey, you really need to have the local community at the table helping to lead the way as how it's going to roll out in there.
Not necessarily lead it, but from the things that affect local communities, as this is urban air mobility, we need urban representatives, other than just the airport authorities. Because some people are going to the airport, but the bigger destinations will not be airports. It'll be going to the office building or going shopping or something, or going home to wherever that is.
Okay. Well, very good. Thank you. I want to ask you just one last question and have each of you kind of respond to it. It's kind of the capstone for the day. And so, the question is, where do you see, I should say, UAM in 5 years or in a semi-mature state? What does that look like in your mind? And what are the one or two challenges that you'd like this group to take away as things that they should be thinking about? And I'll start with you, Mark.
I think it will still be progressing. Maybe for package delivery, we may be there, but for passengers, I think I'm not sure we'll be having that yet. In terms of, the technology is there. It's mostly the regulation side of it. And how is it safety certified, who's doing the inspections, the air traffic control at the local level. And there will be some accidents. When jet aviation came out, there was horrible crashes. There was a big crash went down in Newark, outside of Linden, New Jersey, or Elizabeth, New Jersey, outside of Newark Airport. And the 737 Maxes. I mean, we're still learning in aviation, and so then those are from big commercial aircraft, and the same thing unfortunately we will learn the hard way with urban air mobility as well. But we'll be still progressing.
Any challenges that you want to leave this group with?
Lots of challenges. But I think we talked about ecosystem earlier before, and that the industry has to work together with government at all levels of government. Again, the states should not regulate the cities. I mean, or states should obviously have a policy and regulations, but they shouldn't preclude cities from regulating certain things that affect them. That's an important point. But I think industry and government should work together. And yeah, we are both competitive at the city and mostly at the state level, but also at the U.S. versus other countries as well.
Thanks, Mark. Bob?
Well, I think it still will be evolving in 5 years, and I think the threshold issue remains from a regulatory standpoint, from a policy standpoint. Can we get the FAA comfortable with the risk profile of this industry? I mean, that's what they're responsible for, is to ensure public safety. And so while all that technology exists, operations are occurring. We're watching them happen real time. They occur through Part 107 waivers and such. But until you can demonstrate to the FAA that this is safe, and we've thought through all of these scenarios, they'll continue to sort of just step back and watch. I've worked with the FAA for many years, and frankly, they tend to be risk adverse, perhaps as they should be. But if this industry is going to accelerate, you've got to answer that question. And I think Ohio is actually uniquely positioned to help do that. And I'm working with several of the colleagues here, folks out there. And my mission is, let's get to the FAA and show them how we've thought through these issues and help them with that risk analysis so that we can begin to have mainstream operations. That, again, technology is there, but we've got to demonstrate that the law and the policy have been sorted out and the risk is understood and accepted. Risk tolerances are acceptable. They don't go away. They're acceptable. And we can demonstrate that through data and research that occurs here in Ohio.
Very good. Thanks, Bob. Representative Holmes.
All right, so you've already heard what I said. How much risk was there in going to the moon? How much incredible risk, but we did it. Ohioans went. So it's a matter of sensing, and I agree with everything you said. How about aviation, the Wright Brothers in 1903, and there were aircraft coming off of ships in 1911. So in 8 years, over a century ago, we can, like you said, we can go today. So I feel it because I know Alabama's saying that, and Florida, and China, and the Europeans in California is saying that same thing. We could go today. I feel a sense of urgency, and we could. It's about our political will, and I know my responsibility to organize that. George, you and your guide, like I said, man, I envy you. It's today, right? It's tomorrow. When you wake up, man, it's go time. So please help us out. Go.
Representative Holmes, on many occasions you've mentioned to me and said to me with enthusiasm that this is the greatest day because we're all here together talking about it. And I know you made that comment to me earlier. Right. It is a win, and it's great to have this audience to hear all of your comments and your energy and enthusiasm. And we'll close with Dr. Clark, your vision and your challenges.
Yeah, I think that this is absolutely the right point, that being together and having these conversations is what we absolutely need to be doing. I think, one of my, I don't worry about the risk issues because I have a lot of confidence in this industry, in the incumbent industry. So we're talking about an enabling and an emergent industry that's coming from an incumbent industry that knows how to manage risk. We have really strong institutions that know how to do that. What I do, the only piece I worry about is that the tech sector doesn't have that experience and doesn't have that infrastructure behind it, institutional infrastructure behind it. So I worry about having tech firms be the lead in the implementation and the design and setting the standards for how this emerges. So I think that's the thing to keep in mind. That's happened. We see that particularly with technology diffusion into cities. We see that tension between the incumbent industries that know their job and have the institutional infrastructure to make these assessments and understand these trade-offs, and the tech sector that is comfortable failing fast. In an environment like this, failing fast may not be the way we want to get from here to there. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have a warm applause for this panel?
Yep, so before we head out, I just want to give a few last closing remarks and thank yous. The energy in here today has been quite remarkable, beyond anything I could have ever imagined. So thank you so much for choosing to come to Columbus and to spend your day here really discussing how the birthplace of aviation is primed to take the lead and what the challenges that we face in going to integrate and advance urban air mobility. It's such an exciting time, especially from the perspective as a student, realizing that, I'm inspired now to work, potentially an entire career on making this vision a reality. And coming and being grown up in Ohio, that has made a profound impact on my desire to be contributing to aviation, aerospace. I wanted to say once again, thank you to everyone who's attended. In just 7 hours, we were able to span the entire ecosystem of urban air mobility, everything from vehicles, defining what UAM use cases are, exploring infrastructure, certification, as well as what is it going to mean for our communities. So once again, I really want to give a special thanks to all of our panelists and speakers today who have educated us so much on this space. So another round of applause. And finally, I hope that the relationships built through today's event and the conversations and the ideas that have been sparked, these set a foundation for future conversations as well as initiatives to come. So I believe that the speakers we brought together, as well as the audience we have today, it kind of represents the partnerships between academia, industry, government, and our community, municipalities, legislature that are really required to once again push the needle forward on UAM. So it's special to share this day with you in the state of Ohio because I know that our state is primed to do great things. And with that being said, I would like to let everyone kind of go on, but thanks again for attending the Urban Air Mobility Symposium. Thank you.